For Tennessee to get back to the college football playoffs next fall, Mike Matthews and Boo Carter have got to break out in a major way. It's your Monday Locked On Vols.
You are Locked On Vols, your daily podcast on the Tennessee Volunteers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, good Monday morning, everybody. Welcome into Locked On Vols. I'm your host, Eric Kane. Appreciate you guys for starting your week right here with us on Locked On Vols, making this your first listen, your first watch each and every single morning. Today's show, it is brought to you in part by our friends over at FanDuel, where you can make every single moment more. Like, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's over at FanDuel Sportsbook. Got a fun show coming out today. Breakout players, both offensively and defensively. Mike Matthews, Boo Carter. If Tennessee wants to be where it's, Tennessee wants to accomplish the goals that it sets forth for the 2025 season, these two guys have got to be absolute dudes. They got to be dogs. They got to be Tennessee's best players on each side of the football. Going to get into that here in segments 1 and 2. And then I caught up with Ryan Schumpert after Tennessee's season opening sweep on the baseball field over Hofstra. Got his thoughts on that and a little bit about Tennessee and its comeback win over Vanderbilt on the hardwood. That's coming up in segment number 3 right here on Locked On Vols. Don't forget, tomorrow's show is all about you guys, you everydayers. So send in your questions, comments, concerns at _Kaner and at Locked On Vols. I'll answer those on tomorrow's show. Okay, so I got some inspiration from this topic. It's last week, might have been 2 weeks ago. I just bookmarked it. Ari Wasserman over at On3 put out an article listing 10 college football players with breakout potential in 2025. And he lists a number of different players out there. Micaiah Hughes of Oregon, the running back. Luke Reynolds, the tight end at Penn State. Of course, Penn State's got to replace Tyler Warren, who was just an all-world tight end, did a little bit of everything for him. A couple other players. C.J. Baxter, running back of Texas. Julian Sain, the quarterback, Ohio State. Dante Moore at Oregon, the quarterback. Will Helt, defensive end at Clemson. Cam Coleman, wide receiver at Auburn, former 5-star. Bryce Underwood, incoming 5-star quarterback at Michigan. He lists some honorable mentions in on there as well. But one here at Tennessee that he mentions is wide receiver Mike Matthews. And I was like, okay, well, that's a pretty good candidate. He writes, quote, after Tennessee lost to Ohio State in the college football playoffs first round, Matthews decided to enter the transfer portal, but he eventually opted to return to Tennessee, presumably because there is an opportunity to emerge as Nico Iamaleava's top target in 2025. Tennessee lost 7 receivers, including 5 to the transfer portal after last year, which is by far the most turnover the team has faced in any position. Matthews had only had 7 receptions for 90 yards, 2 touchdowns a year ago, but Tennessee is banking on him emerging as a major threat in 2025. He flirted with the transfer portal. Didn't technically officially ever go in, but the timing and because of the holidays and the weekends and when the NCAA is in office and is not in office, and all that kind of worked in Tennessee's favor. But he did flirt with the transfer portal for sure. But Mike Matthews, obviously, he's a huge part of what Tennessee's success or downfall is going to be on offense in 2024. We can all agree that he probably should have seen the field at a more consistent rate earlier in his true freshman season. Now, towards the end of the year, he was in there. He did play a ton of snaps against the Vanderbilts, against Ohio State. Let's see here. Played 28 snaps against Ohio State, 42 snaps against Vanderbilt, 17 against UTEP. Prior to that, Mike Matthews only had 14 snaps against Arkansas, 13 against Florida, 20 against Kentucky, 16 against Mississippi State. So he hadn't gotten an awful lot, right? I mean, he had gotten some work, but he didn't get as much work as he probably should have. And there was just so much inconsistency at wide receiver this year. And that's why I thought Mike Matthews, it's like, okay, well, if everybody's playing inconsistent, if there are injuries out there, why not put a true freshman that probably has more ability than most of the guys in your room outside of maybe, I understand Dante Thornton's role was deep threat, and that was a good one. But honestly, Mike Matthews should have been out there as much, if not more, than the others in that room of Brew McCoy, of Chris Brazzell, of Squirrel White, different position in the slot. I recognize that. But because of the inconsistencies of that room, and he just wasn't. And I think that was frustrating for him. It was frustrating for Tennessee fans. I think it was because of the flirtation with the transfer portal. But nonetheless, I mean, this is a guy that has everything you can possibly want in the toolbox. Coming up as a recruit in the class of 2024, Charles Power wrote this on Mike Matthews, quote, two-way playmaker with high-end athleticism, length, and coordination, who has blossomed into be one of the better wide receiver prospects of the 2024 cycle. Measures in at 6 foot and a half, close to 190 pounds prior to his senior season. Has a big frame, very good length for the position, 32.75-inch arm and a 9.75-inch hand. Lines up at both wide receiver and safety for Parkview High School, which is, well, of course, where he played high school. Pairs that link with advanced coordination to result in considerable catch radius. Has shown the ability to win contested situations in Friday nights and in 7-on-7 situations. Make difficult catches and adjust to poorly thrown balls. Has the burst and speed to separate on vertical routes. A bouncy athlete who doubles as a standout basketball player in high school in the AAU circuit. Has a number of big games against top competitions as a junior. Caught 48 passes, 1,030 yards, 9 touchdowns as a junior. Throws down impressive dunks on the hardwood. Still developing as a route runner, given that he is more of an athlete and a safety prospect early on in his high school career. Had some concentration drops as a junior. Upside for the position is high, given his overall skill package and room to continually be developed. Again, that was Charles Power, back in the recruiting days on Mike Matthews, who ended up being a 5-star prospect and, let's see here, one of the, top 50 or 60 players in the cycle. Really, really good player. So, Mike Matthews, by default, because you lost Dante Thornton, Brew McCoy, because you lost, Webb and Nimrod and, a couple of these other guys, by default, obviously, he's going to have to be the leader of the room. Him and Chris Brazel. You got Braylon Staley in the slot. You're bringing in Radarius Jackson. You're bringing in Joakim Dotson. You're bringing in Amari Jefferson from the transfer portal. Travis Smith. Travis Smith, I think, is going to be a nice player. I think Radarius Jackson is going to be a nice player. We'll see what Tennessee has in Amari Jefferson. But make no mistake about it, Mike Matthews has got to be the leader in that room because he has the most upside. He's got the most athleticism. And he was a very, very, the Charles Powers reference it here, a very, very skilled safety early on in his recruiting days. And some would argue that, me and Chase Thomas, we're going to get into a subject that we talked about last week in segment number 2 with Boo Carter. We argued, is two of Tennessee's better players playing out of position? Mike Matthews at safety, Boo Carter wide receiver. I'm not going to go, I'm not willing to go down that rabbit hole because I do not believe that, but Mike Matthews has all the athleticism in the world. So, yeah, his 2024 stat sheet was not good. 7 receptions, 90 yards, 2 touchdowns. Overall in the season, he played 199 offensive snaps. That is way too few. Way too few. But he's got so much talent, and he's going to be a year in the system, a year of route running and perfecting his craft, a year of knowing the offense a little bit more, another year of working with quarterback Nico Iamaleava. There's not anybody that's got a higher ceiling, in my opinion, than Mike Matthews outside of Nico Iamaleava on this offense. So for Tennessee to get where it wants to go in 2025, in the college football playoffs and beyond, Atlanta, the SEC championship, to hit that over at 9.5, have another double-digit win season, that would be the third in 4 years. If all that is to happen, Mike Matthews has got to break out in a major, major way in 2025. So that is my breakout candidate as well for Tennessee on the offensive end heading into the year of 2025. What about defense? Who has got to break out in a major way on defense? Well, I've already said his name a couple of times. This is Boo Carter. And some of you guys might be saying, well, he already played. What are you talking about breakout? Well, we're going to define breakout and what that necessarily means to me. All that and more as we continue here on your Monday morning edition of Locked On Vols. Stay tuned. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started. There's no better place to get in on all that action than over to FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on the fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on all the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into the same game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting, whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch 3. I never feel like I miss my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new customers over at FanDuel Sportsbook can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started today. That's FanDuel.com for you to shoot your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel. It's the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, guys, so we talked about Mike Matthews in segment number 1. Breakout player, breakout potential for 2025. And I think overall on the team, he's got the biggest breakout potential for Josh Heupel in 2025. But let's go over to the defensive side of the football. And it's a name in Boo Carter that we're very familiar with. He played a lot as a true freshman in 2024. Boo Carter, 424 snaps. He was named to the All-SEC freshman team. So, he's hardly a guy that we haven't heard about. Like, I think a lot of times when we think of breakout, it's, some guy that's under the radar that isn't expected to play or isn't expected to excel or maybe a lowly rated recruit or whatever, but that's not always the case. In 2023, James Pierce as a sophomore broke out in a major way. Now, remember, James Pierce was a former 5-star prospect. So, it can kind of come in different avenues and different areas of your depth chart, of your roster and all that and more. Boo Carter, I think in terms of breaking out, sure, he jumped on the scene this year. We got to know a little bit about him. We got to see him. He did some things. He helped Tennessee win some games. No, don't get me wrong. But that 424 snap total is going to jump up to at least 650 to 700 in my opinion. It probably needs to play a little bit more. And as Chase and I talked about on the podcast last week, can Boo Carter break out a little bit at wide receiver for Tennessee this upcoming fall? Mike Matthews, let's say that 10 times fast, like Mike Matthews, Boo Carter, Tennessee had to get a deal done to keep him on campus and keep him from entering the transfer portal. I think for Boo Carter, I'm not in his camp, okay? I'm not in his group, but I would imagine you see a guy that has the talents, that possesses the talents that Boo Carter does, and you see Travis Hunter going out and winning the Heisman Trophy, playing both offense and defense, and you kind of sit there saying, well, I can do that. Why am I not allowed to do that? Why can't I go put my game on display on both sides of the football? And so, sure, I do think Boo Carter is going to have a little bit of a role on offense moving forward. But, coming off that show last week with Chase Thomas, and there was a poster on VolQuest, who's an everydayer, Pine, and he made a thread and said, 20 offensive snaps. Do we think it's going to be higher or lower? And I simply responded, Brent Hubbs it a little bit. Until I see it, I'm not going to believe it, right? I got to see it to believe it. Hadn't happened yet, so I don't believe it. And because he's going from a part-time star player, defensive back, to full-time, where he's going to take all the snaps or as much as he possibly can, with giving a breather to a backup for here and there, he's going to have more responsibilities on defense. So I'm not sure what that role on offense is going to look like. Could he be a package player? Could he get 5 to 10 snaps a game? Could he get 2 or 3 snaps a game? Could he get 1 series a game? And then what you do with it, if you produce, then it's going to be hard to keep you off the field. If they run a package player, a package set or whatever, and Boo Carter catches a long gain or catches the ball, makes some guys misses, or finds the end zone, chances are Tennessee's going to want to try that again. So as far as Boo Carter on the offensive end, it's going to be a constant evolution. You got to start somewhere. What do you do with that opportunity? And then it's up to the coaches to continue to make that work. So we'll see what that looks like. I don't know if we're going to see anything in spring practice, but we will see kind of what that looks like moving forward, Boo Carter on offense. But Boo Carter on defense, again, a pretty fine player. You look at his true freshman season for Tennessee on defense, and it wasn't bad. Let's see here. Boo Carter, 38 tackles. That was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That was 6th highest on the team. He had 3 TFLs. He had 1 sack, 1 interception, couple quarterback hurries. Pretty solid. Boo Carter's a guy that is very physical, likes to get in your face, likes to talk a little bit, and we saw that at points in time as a true freshman season. Now, the next step for Boo Carter is to cut down on the missed tackles, to play a little bit better in space when you're charged with covering the speedster in the slot, to make the most of design blitzes from the second and the third layers of the defense when you want to come off the edge and try to wreak havoc in the backfield. Boo Carter, have a bit, cause a couple more turnovers, whether that be forcing a fumble or going and picking off a pass. That's the next step for Boo Carter, and I simply think that if you're on the field for more than 424 snaps like he was this past season, then he's going to be in line to do an awful lot of that. So, again, some of you guys might be thinking, well, Boo Carter, we know what he did. He kind of broke out as a freshman. I'm kind of defining breakout a little bit different. I want him to break out to be an all-SEC type player, and I think that he certainly has that within him. So for Tennessee to be where it wants to be in 2025, I certainly believe that Tennessee's got to have these guys step up in a big way. That being Mike Matthews on offense, and that being Boo Carter on defense. Now, what's going to be interesting for me is, we're still on Boo Carter. You had Christian Harrison and Boo Carter that kind of split that job for most of 2024. I think Boo kind of took over there towards the latter stages. Christian Harrison did have a bit of an injury there, but Boo Carter got 30 snaps against Chattanooga, 23 against NC State, 17 against Kent State. That was a game where everybody played. 12 against Oklahoma. He left in the first half. He was injured. 39 snaps against Arkansas, 32 against Florida, 45 against Alabama. That stretch right there from Florida, Alabama to Kentucky, he played his best football for Tennessee. 44 snaps against Kentucky, 35 snaps against Mississippi State, 40 snaps against Georgia, 38 against UTEP, 32 against Vanderbilt, 37 against Ohio State. So he never played more than 45 snaps in a game. 45 snaps against Alabama, 44 snaps against Kentucky. And again, that's kind of where he was playing his best football, from Florida to Alabama to Kentucky. And he was playing more snaps in those games. So my theory is Boo Carter continues to play more snaps in the season. He's only going to continue to get better and better and better. He's just got that it factor. He's got that playmaking ability. Again, Chase and I talked about this on the show last week. If there's a dude that you want to go to war with, like on the football field, Boo Carter's a guy you want to take. Plus, his ability to return is fantastic. We saw it. He averaged over 16 yards per return on 12 returns this year. Took about midway through the season for him to get back there, which was a bit ridiculous. Kind of like Mike Matthews. He should have been, playing in the wide receiver rotation earlier in the season. But Boo Carter started returning those punts and looked really, really good doing it. So I think Boo has a chance to impact a game in a single game on all three phases. Defense, obviously, in the return game, and then what can he do on offense? Wouldn't it be wild? Again, football's been played for a long time. It's going to continue to be played for, as long as we're out there, right? Hopefully they don't continue to try to, make it an offensive player's game and a quarterback's game to where you have to put flags on all these guys and ditch the tackling. That's a conversation for another day. But football has been played for a long time and will continue to be played for a long time. Wouldn't it be neat if Boo Carter at one point in time next year, had an interception on defense, caught a touchdown on offense, had returned a punt for a touchdown, or gosh, man, what if he had a pick six, caught a touchdown? What if he got a pick six on defense, returned a punt, and then there towards return a punt for a touchdown, and then towards the end of the game, say it's a blowout, maybe it's one of those November non-conference games or whatever, they just get down to the end zone and they throw the ball to Boo just to get him the trifecta. Wouldn't that be cool? A lot of this is wishful thinking. I recognize that, but I do think that you have a guy in Boo Carter that certainly can break out and can impact the game in all three phases and be just a weapon for your football team. So, again, Tennessee's got a lot of questions to answer. You're not going to get all those questions answered in spring practice. Nico Iamaleava has got to take a big step forward. We got to figure out who's going to be blocking in front of him, and that's going to be looked at heavily over the course of the next couple of weeks in spring practice. Wide receivers, Mike Matthews got to lead that group, but there's questions there. How are you going to replace the production of running back Dylan Sampson? Well, I've got confidence that Tennessee can do that with the guys they have on roster. It'll be by committee, not just one guy. Defense, I think Tennessee's going to be really, really salty. I think Tennessee's going to have a really, really good defense next year, just like Tennessee had a really good defense this past year. But if you want to get back to the college football playoffs, and not just get back, but win a couple of games and make a run at this thing, if you want to get it to Atlanta to win the SEC championship, if you want to win on the road in Tuscaloosa or win on the road in the swamp at Florida in the month of November this year, I truly do believe these two guys have got to be your best two players on each side of the football. That's Boo Carter on defense, and that is Mike Matthews on offense, my breakout candidates for Tennessee football in 2025. All right. Tennessee basketball hit the comeback trail down 16 points at one point in time in the first half against Vanderbilt. It did not look great, but it got a whole lot better in the second half. Tennessee rallies, come from behind, taking down Vanderbilt to win at home in the Food City Center over the weekend. And Tennessee baseball, a season-opening series sweep of Hofstra, a JV team essentially, but it is what it is. A lot of great things. Story for me over the weekend was the freshmen and what they did. We're going to talk with Ryan Schumpert on those two subjects when we return right here on your Monday morning edition of Locked On Vols. Stay tuned.
Ryan, it looked like a lot of the same in terms of Tennessee coming out slow out of the gate. I mean, they were down by 16 at one point in time. We remember the Missouri game where Tennessee came back and all that, but I mean, what did Rick Barnes say to those guys at halftime? Because that was a different team in the second half against Vanderbilt.
Yeah, it really was. And from talking to Rick post-game, some of the players, it seemed like, a pretty calm demeanor from Rick Barnes. He did not go in and yell and scream at him. I don't think he needed to do that to get the message across. But it was a pretty simple message. I think he said something to the extent of, you're going to wilt or you're going to grow. It's this time of year. You guys decide. It was kind of a rubber meets the road moment for this team. And Jemai Mashak, he said some stuff to the team, talked about how they had to be more locked into the scouting report. Couldn't have as many breakdowns with defensive assignments. And certainly not that Tennessee season was going to be over. They were going to miss the NCAA tournament or anything like that. But a win the Vols really needed to get in a big second half for them to be able to do it.
I mean, we know this team is so great defensively. It's been, ranked number one Ken Palm defensive team several times throughout the year. But a couple of times here lately against Kentucky twice, 44 points the other day. I believe you can fact check me here. I think that's the most points they've allowed in a half all year long. I mean, what's been going on at times defensively, whether it be for a 10-minute stretch or a half a play?
Yeah, I think, in a simple tone, and I might be a little bit off on the stat, but they played 4 games against Kentucky and Vanderbilt. Those 4 games, those two teams, I think, combined to shoot 44 of 96 from 3. So hitting 48% of your threes would go a long way. But no, I think there's something to the way that Kentucky and Vanderbilt play. A lot of off-ball movement, not a lot of isolation, standing around. I think that can be a little can take advantage of Tennessee's aggressiveness at times. And then I think you add the fact that neither of those teams really have a true go-to scorer. And I think those two combinations force Tennessee, all 5 guys out there, to be locked in. Can't just be Zakai Ziegler, can't just be Jemai Mashak making plays, and everybody else standing around. So I think that combination of those style of plays and it can take advantage against Tennessee, and Missouri was very similar than those two teams, and you saw the Tigers have a good offensive showing in that game as well.
I saw a tweet over the weekend. I think it was John Rothstein. I forgot exactly what it was, but it was essentially saying Chaz Lanier is still the X factor. You said still no clear go-to guy, which is accurate, but there was some stat where he scores at least 16 points. Tennessee's got a really good record. When he scores below 16 points, it's a horrible record. I still think that he is a guy that's got to click for Tennessee to have a long, sustaining month of March.
100%. And I think it was, they're 4 and 5 in games where he doesn't score, whatever the point total was. So they haven't lost, however many wins that would be. I guess they're at 21 now, so maybe 17-0.
Math.
Math.
On the fly.
But for sure, I mean, he just changes the dynamic of Tennessee's offense so much. And so Tennessee offense doesn't have a lot of good rim threats. And when they're a good three-point shooting team, they're going to need to be a good three-point shooting team because he's making a lot of threes for the most part. The guy's typically not going to hit a ton. Igor is a good shooter, but he's not going to hit a ton. Chaz has got to be the guy that gets things going. And, he X Factor, he changes the dynamic of things. And I do think that was a good thing you could say about his performance. I think he scored 20 on Saturday. He did it, only 2 made threes. He found some other ways to score, mostly in the mid-range. But more of that, the better, because if he can do more of that, probably find a little bit more consistency.
Crunch time coming up for Tennessee basketball. A couple weeks left in the regular season, and then, of course, the SEC tournaments, and then the NCAA tournament. We'll continue to look and watch and all that right here on Locked On Vols. Quickly, just a question or two. We're here at the baseball stadium. Opening weekend for Tennessee baseball. They were playing a JV team. You can't really take a lot from playing Hofstra with respect, as I disrespect. But a lot of cool things, here on a Sunday. Reese Chapman hit a grand slam. Hunter Ensley hit a grand slam the other day. I think the story for me, Ryan, is the freshman this weekend. Chris Newstrom, who you and I, we saw in
Yeah.
preseason and fall. I mean, we knew his name. We knew he was coming along. Didn't expect this weekend. Didn't expect Jay Abernathy not to get a start in left field. Levi Clark performed well. Manny Marin had 2 starts. I think the freshmen are the story from this weekend.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Definitely in the field. And yeah, Newstrom, I mean, he was a really big name, really big recruit, and he was kind of the guy of that group that you just named, felt maybe even a little underwhelming in the fall. Not that he was bad or anything, but a step below those guys. And he was great in the preseason. He had a big pizza series last week, and to get 2 starts and left, and Jay Abernathy not to start a game, then obviously got some at bats in there. Yeah, I mean, if you told any of us that covered a team that at Christmas, I don't know if we would have believed you. So yeah, I agree. That's a very interesting development, and probably at least one of the most interesting competitions for Tennessee on the field. And then it's Manny and Levi Clark, man. They can hit, and there's no clear spot for them when everybody's healthy. No clear spot for where they're going to fit in, but those guys are good, and it's hard to think that they won't force their way in and force their way to get some playing time in some sort of role.
It might kind of be an overlap here, but last question. This time next week, we're standing out here. Maybe we'll plan on doing it again next Sunday. What do you want to have learned? What do you want to have learned about this team over the last 4 games the next week?
Yeah, I think, well, since we're sitting outside, I don't know if I really want this for myself, but some 9-inning games just to see the bullpen get expanded a little bit more and figure out what some of those roles look like a little bit more. No Tegan Coons this weekend, he had an illness. No Dylan Lloyd, not quite stretched out enough. Tony Vitello said they wanted to see him throw against some of their own batters a couple more times before he gets out there in the game. So kind of getting all hands on deck and having a full 9 innings to work with and kind of see who they trust the most, who they like the pairings and stuff like that, especially as some of these starters get a little bit more stretched out as well.
Really appreciate Ryan Schumpert for stopping by the show. We recorded that yesterday after the Game 3 of Tennessee baseball, and it was a cold Sunday. It was a cold and rainy Saturday. It was a cold Friday. It's going to be even colder next week. And then it could be 60 degrees the next weekend because this is East Tennessee. Fun show here today, recapping a little bit of Tennessee basketball, Tennessee baseball, talking about breakout candidates for Tennessee on both offense and defense for next football season. Mike Matthews on offense, Boo Carter on defense. What say you? Any questions? Love to hear from you. Send those in at _Caner at Locked On Vols. You can find me on the Instagram page at Locked On Vols. You can comment on this show on YouTube. I will find those as well. I'll spend as much time as I need to on tomorrow's show answering your questions for the mailbag edition of Locked On Vols. Appreciate you guys as always. Thank you so much. And same time, same place. We'll do it again tomorrow. This is Locked On Vols.